It's
saying preparing to live stream the meeting. Yes, I think we are live.
I think we are.
Yes, we are live.
Hey.
Yes, we managed to do it, Julia. Yay!
Hey! That's very exciting.
Yes, I am so glad that we're going to be doing this. We've sort of wanted to do this for a really long time, so I'm really glad that we're finally getting around to it. And hopefully this is going to be an interesting series. So for those of you who are watching, this is not just this one live. We're going to have an interesting set of lives that we're going to be doing, and the whole calendar will be available pretty soon. So let's start with just a round of introductions, Julia. Of course, I am Sindhoor, the director of Bharcs, and most of the people who are joining us probably already know that, but I am so glad to have you here, Julia. For those of you who don't know Julia, I don't know how that's possible.
Well, but, I'm sure there are lots.
I have with me today Julia Robertson, who is the founder of Galen Myotherapy in the UK. And Julia is one of the two people who has been the most influential people in my career, in where I have, sort of taken my life, the direction I've taken my life. So I am absolutely thrilled and excited to be talking to her. I look up to her so much. So I am thoroughly thrilled. Julia, welcome to Bharcs, welcome to the live finally. Would you like to add anything to what you do? Just give us a little bit of that.
Okay, well, first of all, everything that you've just said about me goes from me too. I have a huge amount of respect for what you're doing too. I think it's fantastic. And I am so thrilled to be invited here to speak with you and talk to you. Rather than speak, I'm talking. So what else do I do? I mean, basically, Galen is all about looking after the physicality of the dog from puppy right the way through their life into maturity and into their veteran years. So we look after the physicality of it. We look at the soft tissue. So we're looking after the muscular form, which of course becomes influenced in a negative way all the way through their life unless they are looked after, and certain changes and management within their lives are taken. We can keep our dogs pretty healthy, but it's more about what you don't do than what you do that actually keeps them healthy. So we're all about the treatments, the education. We run training programs too to train myotherapists. So I think that's it in a bit of a nutshell. So it's a bit about muscle rehab and also biomechanics too, understanding how a dog moves and how they walk and move properly.
Right. So I'm just getting my screen here so that, we have, in case we have any questions coming in, we can take that.
That would be great.
Those of you who are watching, if you do have questions, send them in. You can also send them in after this live, because we do plan to have a few more lives. So we'll get to it one way or the other. I kind of want to start by reading part of the book where I talk about how Julia happened in my life.
I'd like to add to a bit of that too.
Okay, because I think it was quite interesting the way our paths crossed. Neither in your country nor in mine.
Exactly. It was like the stars aligned, wasn't it? Yes, it really was. Bizarre, really.
It was, and I think the reason kind of the story is interesting to me is because this was not intended, but I would have never imagined that I would run into somebody who would go on to influence my life in such a big way. and end up also having such a great friendship and all of that. So this is just, it's just wonderful the way it has happened. And so let me just rope in our audience on what happened.
Yeah,
And then
please
we can
do.
fill in the details of what didn't
I will.
All right, so I am doing a reading from my book Dog Nose, the one that's here, and I'm going to be reading the chapter 8, that is titled Beyond Behavior, and the first section of the book is titled Julia. And before I proceed, I must mention that I got a message from Julia a few days after she read the book, maybe, saying, it was so surprising to start reading and then suddenly run into this chapter that's titled Julia.
I had no idea. What? It must be another Julia.
So I can imagine how unnerving that must be. Though I did tell you that I was going to be doing it. So.
Well, but not to that extent. So I was really, really, really shocked. But anyway, right. Please carry on. Please carry on.
Okay. All right. So this is page 241. I met Julia in the US in 2015. Julia Robertson is the pioneer of Galen canine myotherapy. Torreira had invited her over to conduct a 4-day workshop for us. Julia combined a thorough knowledge of dog musculature, a keen eye for dog movement, and an uncanny skill at understanding dog communication. This gave us another strong tool in our belt to help our dogs. During Julia's workshop, we spent a lot of time watching animal movement and posture, trying to see if they could provide clues as to the animal's well-being, wellness. For example, if an animal had pain in one of the joints in their legs, how would they hold it when they stood up? Would they avoid putting weight on that leg? And if they did, how would that leg look when they stood? How would their movement look when they walked if their knee was causing the problem and they were trying to avoid bending the knee? Is there anything that we could learn from watching them sit or stand? If they're constantly favoring one side when sitting or lying down or when trying to get up, does that tell us something about the state of their limbs and muscles? These are questions that Julia had got us to start thinking about. During one such exercise, we filmed 2 of the dogs walking up and down. Julia then worked on both these dogs, manipulating their muscles. This was a jaw-dropping moment for us. Both the dogs had shown intense resistance to touch and were quite reactive towards people trying to touch them. But here was Julia massaging one dog after the other with techniques that seemed to look fairly intense, and the dogs were willing to let her do it. As we watched in wonder, these dogs not only let her work on them, but also went on to do something fascinating. They turned around after the treatment, came up to her, placed their head on her chest, and stood there for a few seconds, making the entire class gasp. These dogs came back the next day, and we filmed them walking again. What we saw then has stuck with me for the most. Their gaits had changed. They were carrying their heads and neck better. They were looser at their limbs and flexing all their joints much better. They had a spring in their step. This was after one treatment. Julia called it myotherapy. It felt like magic. Although I did not understand it, I knew I wanted this for Nishi.
Yeah, it always gets me. It always gets me that when you talk about the dogs. I remember one was called Bear. I remember that dog really, really clearly. Yeah. I remember so many of the dogs that I've met in so many different countries. Yeah, it was quite a moment. It was wonderful. And I always say that the dogs never let you down, do they? They never let you down if you are wanting to show people or demonstrate. They always seem to know that their responsibility almost is to be able to then show people how things can happen, and so you can take it on. But yeah, it was a very, those 4 days actually will always remain with me, because it was the first time that Torreira invited me to come and train with her abroad. And lo and behold, the people that I met in that class, you being one of them, really did change me as well and my direction, and gave me some great friendships. Obviously you definitely. So it was a really, really big moment that those 4 days were astounding. And of course, Torreira is the great conduit, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of, I mean, I'm so grateful for it. So it was Bear and Sadie. I remember the two.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
white one that looked like a
Yes.
dachshund,
Yes.
but was
That's
entirely
right.
white. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I remember there wasn't a dry eye in the classroom when they turned around and put, their head on your chest, and I think that was so moving for me because I mean, it was really, really moving for me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I felt like what you were doing was kind of beyond my reach. I would never get there. But once I started doing it, I started seeing dog after dog actually come and do that. And of course, every time a dog did that, there would be waterworks.
Absolutely. But it's so simple. It's the same thing as what you do, but we do within our therapy. And I think we're quite unique. Well, I know we are. It's called choice. Yeah. And we treat by choice. It's a dog's body. It's not ours. We don't inflict upon. We ask them. And it sounds very ethereal and all, as you very kindly said, magic. It's not magic. It's just giving dogs autonomy. And like, if we have autonomy, we respond better, don't we? And it's exactly the same. And this is why we get on so well. And this is why what Torreira says and what we say, it just, everything is the same. It's all about choice. But we call ours positive pact. And the choice within the treatment side of things has been totally scientifically supported through individual studies that support every little nuance of our whole positive pact.
Yeah. That kind of, I think brings me to a question that I think I know the answer to. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but I know the answer to, but I think our audience will appreciate this too. What brought you to the US? I know Torreira brought you there, but what brought you to Torreira? Why did your paths cross and why did you kind of hit it off?
Oh,
where is the common?
Really? Okay. That too was extraordinary, because one of the first books I ever read that was dedicated to the canine was from Torreira's book. And I thought, wow, this is like on another level. Wow. And I remember reading it coming back from the States, weirdly. So she was up there in my people to know. So one day I got this email from this woman called Torreira. I went, I've been spammed. There is no way that Torreira Rugas would be emailing me, but she was, because we had both been entered into a competition in the States for media, for literature. And I won. I actually won with the DVD, Tongue to Tail, the integrated movement of the dog. And Torreira said I was actually quite cross that you won. But after I got over that, I thought I'd better ask you to come and speak at our symposium. So that you can hear Torreira saying that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
So she invited me to speak at one of her symposiums, and I couldn't believe it that I was actually going over to Norway to speak. And that was great. That I was very, very nervous. And I had spoken internationally before, but not in front of such esteemed crowd. Anyway, I was going through my talk and I just came to, I don't know, slide 20 of 30. And I just said, why do we ask our dogs to sit all the time? Do you know the physical implications of that? And at that point, Torreira, who sits very quietly, without much expression on the sideline, stood up and went, yes, yes. I'll never forget it. Oh, that's good. I have said something right. And she said, at last, I've been waiting for someone to say this along with me. And that was it. That was the moment that she realized that we were on different paths, one psychological, one physical, but we were on the same path.
Yeah.
And that was why the next we were in communication, and I think within months, she invited me to come to the States. So it was a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think what struck me is, the first time you meet Tourette, the first time I met Tourette, the first time I started hearing her ideas, it sounded like, it sounded so strange. It wasn't something I had ever heard. It wasn't something I'd ever heard anybody talk about. And then to have you come in and start talking about similar ideas of sort of choice, of consent, of also, trusting and respecting the dog's knowledge of themselves,
Yeah.
their wisdom about themselves, and kind of coming from a place of humility to say, I am not the expert of you, you are the expert of you, and my job is to kind of just try and read and understand better and cater to what helps you lead your best life. And these were ideas that were new. It took me a long time to understand it, but I think what was interesting for me is you had come in and you were talking about very similar things, and I was shocked actually to realize that you had arrived at similar ideas independent of Tourette. It wasn't Tourette's influence that kind of got you there.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. And I found working, and have found and do continue to find working with her extremely validating, because where I have come from, the ideas that Galen follow and we all follow is exactly the same as Tourette, from knowledge, but mainly observations.
Yeah.
And I've drawn the choice was definitely from observations of how dogs respond when they're treated, and all the gait and everything else. Even though there are certain gait patterns, I look at gait very, very differently, and we look at gait very, very differently. We look at it like functional movement, because function is what it's all about rather than gait. So both of us have come from observations, and I think when people realize that they too can learn so much from observing, the whole new world opens up, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I remember you saying to me at some point, particularly early when I started doing myotherapy, and sort of I was having a...
I always get terrified when people say, I remember when you said, or, what have I said?
We won't talk about those things here.
Oh, no, okay, good. Excellent.
So yes, we will stick to some of the more inspirational stuff.
Excellent, thank you.
But I think it was at the time when I was kind of having a crisis of confidence, and that happens quite frequently, especially when you're trying to read the dog and the dog is in so much pain and you're kind of getting frustrated because you're not able to help. And so I kept asking you, are you sure I'm doing the right thing here? And I remember you saying to me, Sindhoor, be a bit more confident, because what we're doing, this is authentic. It is coming from the dog. This is what we do. This is absolutely authentic. So could you talk a little bit more about what it is you mean when you say this is authentic?
It's authentic means, you've sort of said it really, is the dog is responding to what you do. You're not forcing anything. It's like this wonderful, it's almost like a dance, a perfectly non-choreographed dance. And it's all about the rhythm and just reading each other, really. And they read you in a way that they think, right, okay, I'm not being held here. I'm not being told. I can move if I wish. And if you touch me there, I'm going to respond. Now that response might be, please don't, or great, you've hit the spot. So it's all about this wonderful rhythm, and it really does include three different segments. There's obviously the dog that's at the center, the therapist, but also the caregiver, the guardian. I don't like the word owner like no one else, because that goes completely against the choice. But the three individuals are part of this whole rhythmic thing, which then turns it into something authentic.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, Julia. And I think the few interesting things that you said there, for people who haven't watched how myotherapy is done, this was something that really struck me as well. It's one of the first times I was actually observing a treatment that was being done, which can be quite intensive. I mean, if any of our audience has had a sports massage, you know how intense it can be. And to do something like that, and what struck me is no restraint, no muzzles, no treats, no rewards for doing this. So the dog is actually choosing to cooperate with you, choosing to let you do things that well, what's been interesting is sometimes, I've made mistakes as well, and they give you a margin of error as well. That wasn't cool, don't do it again. But since you're listening to me, I'm okay with just giving you that message and giving you another chance to go ahead.
Absolutely. And basically what it is inviting the dog to join you on a particular area that is defined. So we call that the treatment area. But the moment the dog moves off that area, it's a non-touch. Then they come back to the area. So it's very much, and they know these lines. It's like there's a manual that they all read, right? Okay, if I'm there, I get treated. But if I move, whichever country I've been into, they all get it really, really quickly. So it's about them leaving and then coming back, and it's about the breathing too, because they come back and quite often they'll stand there, but then they take a breath and go, no, I can't do that. I'll come back again. And the reason that the guardian is so important to be there is because they need to check in every now and then, just a quick look to say, all okay, because they need that confidence too. When dogs don't have a huge amount of autonomy within their lives, they do still seem to, or do need to have that check-in, or even if they do have autonomy, they need that check-in. So it's all very nuanced, really.
Yeah. I don't know if you were there, when you visited us in India, but I remember Kushla was there, and this the treatment area thing is such an interesting one, because I'm sure you heard the story. So there were two dogs that came in, and there was one dog called Ammu, who was a distemper survivor. So she was completely twisted and contorted, barely could move. She was literally walking on one leg was, helping.
I remember seeing her.
And we, I'll try to find a picture of that and put it up after this live session. And what was interesting for me is, so that dog had been brought along not for a treatment, but just couldn't be left home alone. So this wonderful lady who was caring for her decided, I'll just take the dog out. And she said anytime we had guests over, she was so aversive to touch that she would go and hide in the room and not come out of there under the bed and not come out. And she would not let anybody touch her, which made sense because, distemper survivor. It doesn't go away, it doesn't leave you.
No.
And but the other dog in the household had been brought for a treatment, and we gave the treatment to the dog, and Ammu kept watching and eventually came and sat right next to the treatment area, sitting right behind, saying, okay, whatever it is you're doing seems to be working, me next. And it's so fascinating that not only are they able to look at what you're doing to themselves and say, okay, this makes me feel good, but they're also able to read that in another dog to say, okay, whatever you seem to be doing to that dog, it seems to be working for that dog, and therefore I like it. And we see this with street dogs in a different context. And I talk about this when we do our street dog studies. We've seen dogs that are a little bit more cautious. they tend to say, okay, I'm going to stay back and look at how you treat other dogs. And if I like what you do, and those dogs don't seem afraid, they seem to enjoy the contact with you, then I will approach you. I mean, this is incredible amount of processing that they're doing, right? And we don't give them credit for any of this. We don't give them credit for them having judgment about their own lives and their well-being.
Exactly. I mean, I remember that. I remember there wasn't a dry eye in the house, was there? But of course, this was when we came to Bangalore. It was back in 2017, wasn't it?
17, yeah.
Yeah, amazing time. And I mean, there are many, many, many situations and experiences that I will never forget. But I think one of them was Alexander the Great, of course, who Alex, he came from a terrible experimental background, and he wouldn't let anyone touch him. But then he had a full treatment and then invited everyone to touch him. It was just incredible. But as you quite rightly say, we just don't give dogs enough, not worth, but like that. We don't consider that they can work things out like we can.
Yeah.
But they need thinking time, like we do too. Yeah.
And I also think that that's kind of where it becomes important for us to be able to read them as well, because all of this that we're talking about in terms of, their knowledge and what they communicate to us, this is something that needs to land. I mean, it can't land on deaf ears. And that's kind of where I think sort of Turid's influence on me really helped me with doing myotherapy, because quite honestly, it's all the names of the muscles and where they're structured and all of that is something I learned all of that, but I'm not so good at it. But what I did learn, is that it's okay if I forget a little bit. The dog will help me, because the dog is able to tell me what they need, and I can count on them. I don't have to necessarily count on what's in here.
No, but you know the anatomy sufficiently to know how to do good and not to do harm. Absolutely.
Right, exactly. So I think that combination of a certain amount of knowledge of anatomy, a certain amount of knowledge of being able to read the dog, and the right attitude to kind of say, okay, I am open and receptive to what you have to say. And that kind of brings me to another question that I sometimes grapple with. So there are these two ends of the spectrum, right? There are some people who will say, I work with my dog completely intuitively. And they're not necessarily intuitive. It's they're working on their dog based on their opinion. And that's hard to know whether they're intuitive or they're not, but they're working on their dog based on their opinion and their experience. And that's kind of, the bedrock of the way they deal with dogs. And then there is the other extreme of people who say, I will only do things that are scientifically proven, that comes from peer-reviewed paper, and nothing outside of that is even something I'm willing to entertain as possible. But reality lies somewhere in between. How do we strike that balance? If I'm somebody who's just starting out in this whole ideology or philosophy, how do I strike the balance and know when do I go with what I feel is my intuition, and when do I take a step back and say, no, let me try and get another more credible opinion on this? How does one go about doing that? I know this, you are extremely intuitive. So have you had this struggle at all?
I have, but I also, like you, understand that it's incredibly important when you're working on another being that you have the knowledge. You've got to have the knowledge. I admit I'm an anatomy geek. I am. And not everyone is, and I get that. However, it's a very, very good question, because really, as you say, in the middle is a good place to be, and with an open mind. I do believe that it's very important. Within myotherapy, we expect a very high level of knowledge of anatomy and physiology, because we must do no harm. So we've got to understand how the body works. We've got to have, I suppose, I don't know if I'm thinking of an analogy, if you're going to be, no, I don't think it will work, you know, a top racing driver, you've got to have an understanding how the engine works. And I think that probably does work. So you do have to have that, but then you've also then, with that knowledge, you can start layering. And intuitiveness is great, but I do think it needs that foundation of knowledge if you are treating and looking after other dogs that you don't know. So as you say, it's sort of in the middle. I think once you do understand how things work, your creativity and intuition perhaps can flower a little more or progress a little further. It's really interesting though, because I was listening to a podcast just a few hours ago, actually, of two top scientists, and they were talking about treating dogs therapeutically and from a veterinary perspective. And then they both started talking about the importance of non-restraint, working out how the dog feels. I went, oh my goodness, wow. So that was interesting. Two people really, academic wise, huge amounts of knowledge, but just beginning to speak much more about respecting that sentient being that you're working with. Now, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, because I'm often asked questions and I go off on ones, but hopefully that's given a bit of an idea of where I sit.
Yes. And I think probably this is true of human doctors as well. Doctors for human beings.
Yeah, human doctors rather than dog doctors. Yeah. I'd go to a dog doctor anytime.
I would. But I think one of the challenges that many of us human beings have is that as we amass knowledge, as we grow in our knowledge, we also grow in a certain amount of arrogance and hubris, which is to say, hey, I have learned everything and therefore I am the expert. And we see that with doctors. Sometimes they're very dismissive of us when we go there. They don't seem to trust us that we bring a certain amount of knowledge about our experience of things. And so we're dismissed off. And I know that there have been a few studies done to show that this is done more to women, in fact, than to men, which is that our experiences in human medicine are often dismissed off as either being hysterical or we're not really being expressing ourselves well enough. And I think that same idea, I mean, if we're doing it to our own conspecifics, if we're doing it to our own species, that's verbal and vocal, and we're dismissing them off and we're dismissing their experience, it's so easy to start doing this to dogs as well, because they're not vocal. And so, and I must admit that I did have moments of that. The more I learned about anatomy, the more I learned about gait, I did have a little bit of, okay, I know what's good for you. And we do that as parents as well, right? To children, I know what's good for you. I know what's better for you. And we get carried away. And I think sometimes it takes some terrible experiences for us to probably rope ourselves back in to say, okay, hold on, bring in that humility. How did you manage to retain that humility? How did you manage to actually, the more you learned, it's so easy to get carried away. How are you the way you are?
I don't know. Interesting question, Sindhoor. Funny, when you were talking, or my life, sort of my professional life sort of flashed before me, I must admit. I think the interesting thing is, but you've just made so many interesting points of how we can be dismissed for having new knowledge. And I think sometimes some professionals get stuck within their own prism of learning. And there are so many that are willing to look out and learn. But before it's documented in any scientific way, it takes a leap of faith for any professional to be able to take that leap. And thank goodness we do have people that are prepared to do it. Now, they quite often have a bit of a rough ride. And I always thought once you burst through the glass ceiling, you burst through the glass ceiling. But no, then I worked out that there's a titanium ceiling, and it just goes on and on. So you've got to admire any professional that bursts out and tries to take on new learning. The thing is with new learning, there is so much now. We're in a very exciting time, I think, and have been for a couple of decades now, when we're actually learning more and more about the body. And one major component of that is the understanding of fascia, and where this connective tissue works within our body, which basically joins us up, and which then makes certain areas difficult to work with, because if we're all joined up, we can't just have one issue in one area. It's got to be joined up. So that's going to be interesting, but that's going to involve a rewrite of all the major anatomy books. So it's very, very difficult. We've got to be very patient, I think, with our professionals, because they've got to work with what they're working with, and these new things that are coming out, we've got to catch up. And I reconciled and recognized quite a long time ago that some of my observations were, and have been over the years, looked upon in an interesting way. Going, oh, don't be ridiculous. I mean, I remember when I first started, and this is 20 years next year, that Galen's been going, that I went to sporting events with canines and said, your dog's an athlete. And people used to laugh at me. They actually openly laughed at me. They're not laughing now. Dogs are now treated more like athletes and are actually given that consideration that other animal athletes are. So that's taken a while. I was the first to say, don't throw balls, don't jump out of the car, all these things which are now taken on by pretty much everyone. And it's great to know that. But when I first said it, people thought I was overreacting, that it was ridiculous. So I think sometimes one has to realize that maybe we're influencers of change, and then we allow the science to catch up.
I know that's kind of what's been
with the observations. But yeah, it's an interesting question, though. It's an interesting question.
You know, you mentioned leap of faith. I kept thinking about it. Leap of faith requires that we have a tremendous amount of confidence in ourselves, and a sense of comfort about saying it's okay if I don't get this right, but I'm going to take this leap of faith. And also in our dogs. And this is an interesting one that we do even with behavior at Bharcs, right? What I tell my students when they talk about how do we get the dogs to kind of socialize and things like that, and I say, you know, they are pretty good at problem solving. What you need to do is to get them to a place where their brain is working well, they're, you know, cognitively sound, emotionally regulating, their communication has got
safe
to place,
and in a safe environment.
That leap of faith, you know, and then let them, you know, and it's a hard one to do. And you're right in that the more work we put into the foundation of understanding them, the knowledge and all of that, it really helps us do that. But I think the last bit of it is something to do with the heart. It's a hard one to pin down, you know, that last bit where we, you know, say, okay, I've got all the knowledge, I've done all the groundwork, but that very last bit is something, I think that has to come from within. You can't seem to figure out what it is that lets us do that.
I think you're right. I think
that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, we've all got eyes, we all see things, but I think we all see things differently. And it's a bit like color. I mean, we all probably see color differently. And I think sometimes some people observe things and they all see different things. Now, I see some things that other people wouldn't see, and vice versa. So I do think that that's it. It's what you see and then what you absorb and how you interpret that. But I know a lot of my observations have come but also taking things forward, especially with our functional biomechanics. It's all about what would a dog do naturally. What would they do now? And that's exactly how you work too. What would they do naturally?
Yeah.
And your studies with street dogs and are invaluable for things like that, because we need to know what is normal or what should be normal.
Mm. You know, this is an interesting one, because I do see that there are a lot of people out there who seem to have this sort of what happens naturally. The natural bit is looked as less efficient, less desirable, maybe not as improved. And it's looked, the way I've seen some people look at it is to say, oh, that's natural, that's not that great. When it comes into our hands and when we add our magic on top of it, we make it better. We don't seem to appreciate, you know, nature and nature's work into having evolved these animals, and you know, the role that it plays in I mean, nature crafts them quite beautifully, and we don't seem
Yep.
to appreciate that.
No, it's a real shame. And we are expecting a lot of change incredibly quickly in our dogs. I mean, I've just completed a book too, and part of it about puppies and developing a puppy. And looking back, thousands of years, dogs have been in our lives, and they've lived alongside us, part of our lives, absolutely intrinsically involved. And then suddenly, in the last few years, we bring them into our house, into our world. We leave them alone. We do all this other stuff, physical and emotional stuff, that we are expecting them to adapt within a couple of decades, from thousands of years of anatomical adaptation to their life, their substrates they walk on, how they hunt, how they do everything. And we're suddenly expecting them to change. And that's not natural, is it?
No.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. Natural is good because it fits with how the dog is designed, whether it's mental or physical, both.
Yeah. I'm very excited about this book of yours. So we're probably going to talk about it in one of the later lives. I'd like a little.
I'm really sorry, Sindhoor. There's not anything called Sindhoor in there. I'm so sorry. I feel I've let you down.
Oh, let me be the judge of whether I feel let down about it. But we're kind of, you know, overshot a little bit. So before I let you go, I want to put you on the spot and ask you, what do you like? What do you like about my book? I have mentioned a lot of things about myotherapy. What stood out for you if you had to pick one thing out of it?
Oh, one word, honesty. Wow. Do you know, I mean, that was tough. When I read some things, because I know you, I just thought, wow, that was a tough thing to write, because none of us want to admit that we've had things wrong. And I was bowled over, seriously bowled over, because that is an authentic book. We might treat dogs authentically, but that's an authentic book, because not only you very kindly talked about us and when we met and everything, but I know the other stories too. I know them. And it was totally honest. It was from the heart. And I cried a lot. I really did. So yeah, I can't say much more than that. It is, and it's such a good read. And I have a very low attention span, believe me. And I couldn't put it down. It was lovely, but honest. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for saying that, Julia. And you know, what I've come to realize is that with honesty comes a certain honesty is liberating.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
if I can admit that I have been wrong and I can be wrong, then I'm not afraid to make mistakes, which means that I can grow like I can't ever imagine.
Sindhoor, it goes much further than that. It means that other people are allowed to.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Because we all make mistakes. Yes. The trick about that is to learn from them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
How do you remember, when did we decide that you will come to India and we will actually, Bharcs and
Standing
Galen
outside,
overlap?
right? No, standing outside a car, outside Grace's home, within a couple of days of meeting. And we both looked at each other and we both said almost simultaneously, we must work together, didn't we?
Mm.
We both said that. And I said, we must. And you said, would you come to India? And I said, tomorrow, or something like that. And I have to say, every time I think of, we had the most amazing time with you. It was slightly mystical and amazing, wasn't it? Met fantastic people. The dogs were incredible. It was quite, well, it was the most memorable trip ever. And, but we decided then that we were going to work together, whatever. Was that right? Is that your recollection too?
Yes, it is. And I also remember, like I mentioned to the other day, I remember sitting in the back seat of the car. We were having this discussion. We were having a discussion about the things we want to do together. And I said, I love you, Julia. And you said, I love you, Sindhoor.
I love you.
Sitting in the front seat, getting very, very annoyed with us. And she's like, oh, get a room, you two.
Stop it. Heart on sleeve, people. Heart on sleeve, people. Yeah. It is just extraordinary how paths cross, isn't it? And honestly, I always have been and always will be so grateful that our paths crossed, and just amazing how it did, because it's been it's just fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to all the stuff we're going to do in the future too, because we have plans, don't we? We always have plans.
We always have plans. So speaking of plans, I just want to mention to those of you who have kind of stuck with us for this live, we do intend to pick up specific topics in the book that are a bit more focused and sort of the overlap between what we do at Bharcs and what Galen does. And so we're going to have more live sessions on that. We will publish our calendar. But if you have any questions, meanwhile, please send it across. As you can see, Julia and I have no problem chatting with each other.
I was going to say we will stop at some stage.
Yeah.
It's now Tuesday afternoon.
Yes, we will try and stop at some point.
Yeah.
I think one of our team members will come and have to sort of pry us from.
To pull the plug.
This was so fun, Julia. I mean, I loved it. I loved having relived all those memories and having gotten to ask you a few questions that I haven't done in the past, and I hopefully will do more of that in the lives to come. So beware.
Maybe I'll think of some questions for you too.
Of course.
Without telling you, yes.
Bring it on. I think I can handle it.
Definitely. Sindhoor, it's just been brilliant. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed today. I hope everyone else did, but I most certainly did.
Absolutely. I loved it too. And looking at the comments, it looks like most people loved it too. I'm just going to see if there are any questions here that we can quickly take. Most of them are just wonderful messages. One of the messages here says, do your myotherapy sessions take place in your own office or do you do house calls?
Well, I work here now from my office, but all the other myotherapists, they do various things. They go to house calls, and some have their own places too. So it varies. And
now you do distance support as well, right? So you train guardians to be able to see and help their own.
The distance support program, I'm delighted with how that's going. There are some very, very dedicated people out there, and they're just a pleasure to work with. And they've made significant differences to their dogs themselves in a supportive program. It's fantastic. I love it.
You have a lot of people who do distance support from India, consultants in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a joy to work with them. It really, really is.
Yeah. Another interesting one, we know that behavior and pain are related. I was wondering if once we remove the pain, will the behavior related to that pain also diminish, or could this become learned behavior? I was thinking about my dog who used to lick his paws until we got to the bottom of his pain issue, and this paw lick behavior dissolved. But is this always the case in your experience?
Well, that is very much, I think that's a little bit more of a question for you, Sindhoor, actually. It depends on what type of behavior it is. For me, the licking and the chewing could be a referral pain. So it could be a physical symptom, like it could be something like a pins and needles or pain in their foot that they're actually trying to almost alleviate by creating a greater pain or diverting it. So in that situation, in my experience, then the behaviors change. But if there are other types of behavior, that's when it gets a little more complex. However, I do know dogs that are very protective because they don't want other dogs to be running into them and things like that. And that can have a dramatic change. Once they feel more confident in their body, then the behavior is much more positive too. But that's a very good question. Yeah. And I think it's got many different tentacles to it.
Absolutely. I think also it's not just, I think, we shouldn't be looking at behavior just as a is there or isn't there. It's also the quality of the behavior. Yeah. So for example, if I think of my own pain and my own behaviors, I do have a certain I tend to do this. And this came from, my RSI, wrist issues, back in the day when I was a computer engineer. Yeah. Now the pain is not there that much, but this is still a habit. I still do this. Yeah. Pick it up from there. But the quality of this does change. If I do this when I am actually in pain, you can see that I'm wincing, my mind is on this, there's the focus. Whereas now when I do it when there's no pain, I'm sort of zoned out and, I'm doing this, I'm not really paying attention. Yeah. So I would imagine that, and this what she's talking about, which is, licking, once the pain reduces, is the behavior still there as a habit, or learned behavior as a habit? It maybe could be, but if we observe closely, we'll probably see a difference in how that behavior is being, how the dog is engaging in that behavior. I think that really interesting one to pay more attention to.
Yeah. But very good question. Very, very good question. Yeah.
All right, that was it. The rest of the messages are all just telling us that they like the chat, so you can have a look at it. And so since many of you like it, we will definitely be back chatting more, bantering, and all kinds of stuff.
That's lovely. I mean, one thing that I must say is quite a miracle is my internet's held out. Yo! That's a rare thing.
Yes, I know. Having had a chat with you, I know.
Oh, dear. The times I've done talks on my phone, because it's the only way I can get contact. Yes. Anyway, I'm delighted that it has.
Yes. The internet gods have blessed us.
They have indeed.
Yes, we'll take that as a sign that we will be supported through this little thing that we want to do. And with that, I will let you go, Julia, let the audience go, and we will chat with you again next month.
Brilliant. Look forward to it, Sindhoor. Look forward to it. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everyone.